All right, so we are basically talking about organizational structure and professional consultants. So as we go, you will understand the structure that is involved in the building of or rather a construction of a building. Okay, so that's the organizational structure we're talking about, and it's the professional structure. And as it says here, professional consultants as well. So we are speaking about the consultants that we started speaking about in week 1. So this is just a continuation of that with their roles and their responsibilities. Um, that's what we'll be talking about. So let's start off here. Let's start with a quantity survey. And the reason I wanted to start with a quantity survey is because students often, as students, you often confuse quantity surveyors with land surveyors just because that word surveyor is there. But quantity surveyors are very different. Okay. And the role really, to understand a quantity surveyor, what a quantity surveyor is interested in is just the money, right? His job is to survey the money, survey the quantities that are needed to construct a building as well as the money it costs to acquire those materials. So, like I said, number one, to prepare, to establish the cost structure, and also the quantities involved in the actual construction. So here I have pre-contract stage. Now remember last week we did say that pre-contract stage, the word contract there, actually we're referring to the construction period because that's the contract stage. The contract stage is the construction, the actual construction of the building. So when we're talking about pre-construction stage, we're talking about the stage before, or rather the time before construction actually takes place. So here it says before construction takes place, he would have prepared an approximate estimate of the quantities and the amount based on the sketches. So a quantity surveyor would take a drawing from an architect and say, okay, I see you've got so many walls. The area is this large. So what he does, he calculates the material that's going to be needed in order to construct that building. So he will calculate that we need 1,000 bricks, 100 bags of cement. He's going to calculate that. We're going to need this much labor, and all of it is going to estimate the pricing range of it. He will give an estimate cost of all of those things after quantifying them. So, like I said, he is involved with the money, right? So what he wants to do is quantify all the material and the skill needed, and then put a monetary value on that. So he does that before construction happens. And now during the construction stage now, he carries out monthly valuations which enable the contractor to receive payment. So he would actually, at the end of the month or end of the week, he would say, okay, the contractor has used this amount of material on site to construct. So this is the amount that he should be paid for. Okay, remember he's involved with the money. So I just keep on having to hammer that because a quantity surveyor is different from a land surveyor. Quantity surveyor, he is just on the money. Okay, so during construction, he's just checking out how much material has been used, and then this is the amount that needs to be paid for that. He's responsible for cost control as well. This means that he's responsible for the budget, to say that, okay, we spent this much on cement. Probably it would be better, you would make a saving. You can advise the contractor as well to say you can make a saving on your cement if you buy it locally rather than bringing it from, a far place. So these are our cost control measures, because buying locally means you'll also not just spend less on the material, but you also spend less on transporting it, and also you'll spend less on time taken to bring the material on site. Okay, so quantity surveyor does that. He analyzes variation orders. We spoke about variation orders even last week, that if initially pre-contract, the quantity surveyor would have said, okay, based on the drawing, I'm estimating 1,000 bricks will be needed to build this wall. But it so happens that during construction, it's discovered that actually we need 1,200 bricks. So that extra 200 bricks, you then prepare a variation order, because you are now ordering an amount that's actually varying from the original amount. Okay, you're ordering an amount that is an extra amount. So to do that, you prepare a variation order, and that's what a quantity surveyor is involved in as well. And then provisional works such as foundations, drainage, and external works have to be remeasured by the quantity surveyor. So even as construction is going on, the quantity surveyor still has to calculate the amount of material that's needed, the amount of material that's used, the amount of material costs as well, and all of that. That's what the quantity surveyor does during construction stage. And then post-contract duties. Now, this is after construction has been done, the building is complete, everything is done. So he prepares a final account to enable the architecture to prepare the final payment certificate. So after everything has been done, he then sits down and takes and consolidates all his information as in how much material was used and how much it costed in total value. And then he balances that up with the final payment certificate that's due to the contractor. Okay, so that has to do with the duties of a quantity surveyor. I just had to start with him so that you make that distinction that a quantity surveyor is involved with the money and the quantities of material and services needed on site. Okay, now let's talk about someone else that you haven't heard of before. This is a person that's called a building control officer. Now, a building control officer is employed by the local authority, so he doesn't work for the employer, he doesn't work for the contractor. Either he works for the local authority, such as the municipality, a local municipality. Okay, so his job is to ensure that the building regulations are conformed to. So sometimes you might find that in a certain area, the building regulation is that all houses here must have green roofs. So he's there to make sure that as you construct that building, when you come to the roof, it actually has a green roof, that you construct a green roof. If you're not constructing a green roof, you can stop all works and ask you to redesign and put in a green roof, just so that you can conform to the local regulations. Okay, so he also ensures that the employer or client's building is built to set standards and norms. Also, there are certain norms and standards in the construction industry, such as, are you using local, not just local material, but are you using local labor to construct? Those are some of the norms that actually need to be enforced by the building control officer. Okay, so you are not bringing people from overseas to build it unless it's a specialist, but under normal circumstances, generally general workers and general labor, usually the norm is that it's someone local people. He also approves the architect's drawings and specifications, because remember, the building control officer knows the regulations of that land. So when the architect brings the drawing, the building control officer can then say, I see that your roof is not green, so please go and redesign and make your roof green. Okay, so that he does that. Once the architect makes the roof green, he then approves it as a building control officer. He also does random inspections on site. He can just come on site to check time and again in various stages if everything is being constructed according to the approved documents. So that's the approved building drawing from the architect and things like that, to make sure that the roof really is green. Okay, so that's a building control officer. He works for the municipality or local authority. Okay, and then there's someone that's called a clerk of works. Now, a clerk of works is the one who represents the employer. He works for the employer or the client. Okay, he doesn't work for the contractor. So just like the architect works for the employer, so does the clerk of works. What does the clerk of work on the construction site? He works under the instructions from the architect. So he would have been, briefed by the architect as in what's going on site. Here, the drawings, here are all the documentation that's needed. And then the clerk of works then works under the architect because it's based on site. And then he must understand interpretation of the terms of the contract. So during construction, the clerk of works is the person who is an expert as well in understanding the actual contract, in understanding the actual drawing from the architect. He has to understand all documentation involved in the construction, and he must attend site meetings and take leading part in the discussion. So the clerk of works can hold meetings so that he can brief the workers on site, since he is the one who understands the contract more on site. Okay, so he must have an architectural background as well as a brief engineering background to make sure that he actually can understand everything that's happening on site and be able to resolve conflicts as well as they come up on site. So usually these clerk of works are retired engineers or retired architects, people who have been working for a while, who have experience in constructing, so that they can run the construction site the way that it's supposed to. Okay, just further duties of the clerk of works. Represents the architect and the employer. We've spoken about that. He inspects the workmanship as it progresses. Now that means that as the workers are working on site, he is in charge of making sure that he inspects the way that they work, to make sure that they are producing a good quality product which is the building that they are actually constructing the way they're supposed to and in good quality way. Okay, he interprets contracts. We've spoken about there. He maintains a daily diary. Now, he is always on site. He has to be on site to monitor everything. So as he inspects, he writes down on a diary, and then that diary is called the daily diary because he writes down every day. He records what was happening on site, where, when, and how. He must be as detailed as possible. Okay, and then he submits weekly reports. So he makes sure that as he writes the daily diary information, at the end of the week, he compiles all of that into a weekly report and then sends it to the architect to brief him. He writes minutes in meetings. So as he's running the meeting with all the construction people on site, he also writes minutes to make sure that everything is recorded that's said in the meeting. He acts as a chairperson in the meeting if the architect is not around, because sometimes the architect will come on site, but in case he's not, he is the next person in line to be in charge of the entire site. Okay. Now, the interaction, this is something, the reason we put it here is because this is an examinable information. In the exam, they ask what is the interaction between a clerk of works and the foreman. So we need to speak about this. Now, we have defined what a clerk of works is. Let's define a foreman. Now, a foreman is someone who is in charge of the workers doing a certain job. Like, for example, you'll have a foreman for the workers who are doing just the construction of the wall. You'll have a foreman for people who are doing construction of maybe the windows, construction of the roof. So you have different foremen on site, okay, who are specializing on one particular thing. So now the foreman supplies the clerk of works with convenient site office. Okay, so it's like this. You have the architect, and then you have a clerk of works, and then you have a foreman, and under the foreman, there's, maybe little foremans and, team leaders, and actually the workers, general workers as well. So the foreman supplies the clerk of works with site office. He tells him where he must be stationed. The foreman must always take information about construction detail from the clerk of works. So the foreman gets in, like I said, the hierarchy. So the information flows like that as well. The architect tells information to the clerk of works, and the clerk of works tells information to the foreman. The foreman tells information to the general workers. Okay, so it's like that. So the foreman must not interfere with clerk of works and other workers while performing his duties. So that's just to say the foreman mustn't disturb the clerk of works when the clerk of works is working. The foreman must ensure that data on variations is checked and signed by the clerk of works. So remember, we spoke about variation orders. So it's the foreman who would actually find out that actually we need 200 more bricks because now we've used 1,000 and we're still not done. So then he tells that information to the clerk of works, okay, that we need more bricks. And then the clerk of works can speak to the quantity surveyor as well, or the architect. It's up to him. But it's the foreman who relays the information to the clerk of works. And also the foreman should not contact the architect directly, but should go via the clerk of works when there's a need of information. So just like the hierarchy is, the foreman cannot skip the Clerk of Works and they go to the architect to ask for information, or go to the employer even. No. He speaks to the Clerk of Works, and then the Clerk of Works speaks to the architect, and then the architect speaks to the employer. That's the hierarchy on site to keep things in order. That must happen. Okay, so let's speak about different role players, stakeholders, different people that are involved in a typical building, the professionals that you will find on site and all of that. You will find a project manager. A project manager's responsibility, you need to pay attention to this because this is examinable as well. The project manager is responsible for project planning. So he plans the sequence of events. Like, for example, okay, so first of all, we're going to start by putting foundation. And then we're going to put, after foundation, we're building walls. After building walls, we're putting windows. After putting windows, we put the roof in that order. Okay, so he plans that as a project manager. He prepares the tender documentation. Remember, there's tendering involved here, so that different contractors can apply for the job to actually do the building. So the project manager prepares the tender document. He runs site and client meetings. So he would go on site to pick information from the contractor, Clerk of Works, and then he would take it to the architect or the employer as well. So he's between the client, which is the employer, and the contractor. He makes sure that the client is paid on time. Now that word, not client, he makes sure that the contractor is paid on time. That was a mistake there. It's not supposed to be a client, because client doesn't get paid. It's the contractor that gets paid. The client is the one with the money. And then he prepares regular reports based on what was planned, okay, and timelines and stuff like that. And then you will find also a resident engineer. A resident engineer can be a civil engineer, geotechnical engineer, electrical, structural. All these people are just, I'll put them under civil engineering because they're just branches of civil engineering. Since, with the exception of, actually, civil engineering is the mother of all other engineerings. You got a civil engineering on top there, and under it, you got geotechnical, electrical, chemical, because the world figured out that actually we need more than just civil engineers. Speaking about the resident engineer as well, he ensures that the work is done according to the contract documents, because he would have received documentation as of what should be done on site, when, and all of that, the regulations. He makes sure that everything is done accordingly. Okay, he must be able to communicate clearly with contractors and clients. So yeah, the resident engineer speaks to both contractor and the client as well. He must be prepared to answer contractors' questions. That means he must be the one who understands the project as well the most, because so that if the contractor has a question or a dispute, he can sort that out very quickly. Okay. He must do quality control inspections and scheduling. What that means is that quality control means that he must make sure that there's the quality work being done on site. Okay, so if the document said put 2 bricks, the contractor doesn't cheat and puts 1 brick, but he actually puts 2 bricks. Okay, so that's part of quality assurance. and inspection. So he drives the site, he walks the site to inspect and see what the contractor is actually doing. Okay. And then we have the contractor. Now he's responsible for building the structure. That's what the contractor does. He's the one that actually does the actual building. He also supplies all building material, the labor, building equipment, the services to get the structure built. So that means that as a contractor, I must have the bricks, I must have the cement, I must have the roof, the windows. But sometimes as a contractor, you might not have the, say, for example, the escalator, if it's needed in a building. So now you bring in subcontractors. Now, subcontractors does construction work um, on behalf of the contractor. So that means that now the subcontractor is the real specialist in putting in escalators. The contractor is not a specialist in that, so you'll bring in a subcontract to do the specialist work on site, and that one we call him a subcontractor. Okay, and then lastly, this is my last slide. We're going to talk about the building inspector. Now we've spoken about a building control officer, same thing with the inspector. He inspects buildings to ensure that they are built according to building regulations. So the inspector doesn't really work for the employer or the client. It doesn't work for the contractor or subcontractor. He works for the local authority. And then lastly, you have the mortgage lender, the person with the money. Is responsible for financing the building project. So sometimes a client will go to a bank to borrow money to build the building, and so the bank is what we're referring to as a mortgage lender. Okay, he's responsible as well for getting the money back in repayments once the structure has been built. So as a bank, think of a banker. Once you build your building, you build your mall, you need to pay them back. So he's responsible as well for claiming his money back. He must find out if the borrower can afford to pay back the loan. Well, that happens in the beginning. He assesses the client's work, planning to build a mall. Okay, will you be able to pay back that money? Let's see, what are you planning to do with the mall? Okay, I'll put in shops. I'll charge them this much. So based on that, well, you can be able to pay back the money. So we give you the loan. That's what a mortgage lender does and is responsible for.